Millions of people all over the world watch Outlander and read the huge book series by Diana Gabaldon. Even though fans and academics have pointed out for decades that her research is sometimes wrong, the series has a way of making its way into the hearts of the people. But recently, the author has made her fans angry. She tried to Scotsplain to actual Scottish people, and no one was having it. In this day and age, you've got to be careful about what you put on the internet. People take screenshots, record everything, and no one forgets anything. Plus, if you find yourself saying something stupid on Twitter, you better believe everyone will come after you. Something like this happened with the author. She found herself on the bad side of Scottish Twitter, which is a force that can't be stopped. A fan started the conversation by asking where they'd buy the hat that Jamie Fraser wore. Her answer was pretty typical. In medical terms, she came down with a bout of verbal diarrhea. She tried to make fun of the user by calling him a slur. Yikes! She called the hat a Scotch bonnet, which it wasn't. It was a tam o'shanter cap, which is a style of flat bonnet that was popular with Scots back in the 1600s. They are still sometimes seen at cultural events and military events. Not only are they worn as part of lame Halloween costumes, but you may also see them with fake ginger hair on them. Scotch bonnet is a pretty insulting phrase, and the internet wasn't happy with her at all. She was called out on Twitter by literally everyone. If you call a Scotsman or woman a Scotch, you might just get punched. This word would never have been used by a real Scotsman, so it's pretty obvious that the name of that hat wasn't what the author claimed it was. It was probably a slur that she used. It's not surprising that she thinks she knows a lot about a country she has only been to once to do research for her books. Due to the popularity of the TV show, which was filmed in Scotland, the tourism boards there go out of their way to help her. But that doesn't give her the right to claim that she knows more about the culture than she actually does. She's just like the millions of non-Scots who wrongly think they can call Scotland home because their great third grandmother's husband's cousin's puppies spent the summer at Loch Ness. Plus, while the entire world loves the series, there has been a little shift. Since her inconsiderate and downright dumb comments, people are flooding social media with their thoughts about her and the show. The biggest problem seems to be centered around one thing in particular. There are a lot of historical inaccuracies in the show. One of the best things about a show like this one is that you can enjoy so many different things about it. There are a lot of things that draw people to a show, such as romance, action, drama, good acting and writing, and so much more. The best part for me, though, is to learn about historical events. Not everything is accurate, though, and that makes sense, because it's a dramatic retelling. But if the author of the books the series is based on claims that everything is accurate, you expect it to be. Unfortunately, people who know a lot about history often criticize the show for how it strays from reality and uses fantasy to tell the stories of the wars and battles of the time, which aren't accurate at all. So I'll help you keep track of all the inaccuracies, like a witch trial wouldn't have happened. In the first Outlander book, witch trials were made up by the author. In the second half of the first season, we saw them on screen. In the show, Leary claims that Gellis and Claire were witches because Claire took Jamie from her.
Hexed Jamie and turned him away from me. She stole him.
This is nonsense. I didn't hex anybody.
Silence! Clearly, she's a jealous young lass with a broken heart.
The last Scottish witch trial wasn't held until 1727. By the 1740s, it was illegal to say that someone was a witch. So, historically, the plot doesn't make much sense. Speaking of practices that didn't exist back then, people weren't as clean. If people watching knew how bad the real people must have smelled during the passionate and steamy scenes, they mightn't like the show as much. People in the 18th century didn't have access to modern hygiene products. They didn't have toothbrushes, toothpaste, or even soap. This fact is rarely brought up. So it makes sense to say that no one would have looked as good as they did on the show, and they would have smelled horrible. Washing and cleaning your own body wasn't that big of a deal back then, but they had to do it in the show to make the romantic scenes look better. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been sexy for anyone involved. Personal hygiene aside, there were pretty big historical inaccuracies in the show. They didn't bounce back from World War II this quickly. Claire was a nurse during the Second World War in her past life, before she went through the stones at Cry Nadun. When she first showed up, the war had just ended. The way the end of the war was shown on the show, it seemed like life went back to normal almost right away. But the reality of the events was pretty different. After the war, it took years for everyone to get back to normal. Historical documents have verified that things didn't seem to get back to normal until 1947. In this case, the story in Outlander benefited more from not being true to history. Plus, the Jacobites in the show didn't carry any charges on the battlefield. There are weapons in the battle that can be used to attack or defend. So, when fighting an opponent on the battlefield, a warrior should have both an offensive and a defensive weapon. Those who were paying attention noticed that the Jacobites didn't have either of these things. In the 18th century, Scots used targes, an Old English word for shield, to protect themselves from bayonets and other redcoat weapons. Even though most of the actors in Outlander were armed with broadswords, only a few of them wore targes during the battle scenes. In reality, they would have needed both of them to get out of that situation alive. Most likely, the audience didn't notice it at the time. But now that I've brought it to your attention, it's annoying, right? Also, that wasn't the only thing wrong on the battlefield. Jaime's tartans were the wrong colors. I hate this one the most, because it's a very big mistake in the show. There are two different Fraser families. First of all, Jaime is from a Scottish clan called the Frasers of Lovat. Also, they're not the only clan in the lowlands with distant ties to the Frasers. In real life, the tartans on the Fraser of Lovat clan kilts were bright red and green, but in the show, they were gray and blue. Oh yeah, imagine that! Even though this was a fun costume idea, it was very far from the truth. It seems strange that the producers of the show didn't want the main characters to wear real tartan colors, but maybe the show's designers thought they'd be too bright for the show's setting and story. Instead, they had to make changes because apparently red dye is pretty expensive. So, money over authenticity? That's all we've got on why Outlander fans are angry with the author Diana Gabaldon. See you in the next one.